So this letter is in response to this other listener letter that we got that that kind of asked the question, in a kind of revolutionary way of thinking, why do trans people need to change how they change their assigned gender? Why can't people just all express their gender however they want? Isn't that subversive of the gender binary as opposed to identifying as male or identifying as female or preferring certain pronouns or what have you? Mm-hmm. Is that a fair recap?
Yeah, and why not? The first listener was taking the why not show that you can be a woman in any way that you want?
Right.
Why say that you are a man? Isn't that regressive? Isn't it more subversive to say I can be a woman however?
Right.
And so this is a response to that.
Right. And we responded as best we could, but we also said, trans listeners, please respond because you can speak about this better than we can. And so we got an email from a trans listener who says, I'm writing in regards to your listener who is confused about trans people. Specifically, they were asking in good faith about why we feel the need to change rather than just present differently. I'm going to talk about trans as a biological and psychological phenomenon. It is obviously more than just its symptoms as a disorder, but I think starting at the concrete level of biology might help. I would also like to say that everything I'm saying is how I feel about my own trans identity. I can't speak for anyone else whose experiences and lens for understanding might be different. I'd also like to offer the caveat that I'm sort of leaving genderqueer and intersex stuff out for the sake of simplicity. Suffice to say that third gender categories pop up often in cultures around the world, and it's sort of just a fluke of history that we in the West have only recently begun to recognize it, and that biological sex appears in more forms than just the ideal of male and female. First off, a bit of pendantry. Social scientists distinguish between gender and sex. Gender is psychological, whereas sex is biological. Gender is between the ears, sex is between the legs. The two are distinct, though related traits, though we tend to equivocate them when speaking colloquially. Understanding that those two different things is the first step to getting the rest of it. I recently went to the doctor for the first time to get prescribed hormones, a testosterone blocker, and estrogen in my case. We were talking about insurance, and my doctor said that she usually files trans care as, quote, endocrine disorder not otherwise specified. I think this is a decent way to think about it. People sometimes feel iffy about having trans classified as a disorder at all. But there is definitely an underlying biological element to it, albeit one that manifests itself in psychological symptoms. After all, trans usually is treated by hormone therapy and a social transition. So for at least those who transition, there is an element of biology involved. For me, the psychological symptoms are a profound sadness, either at my body or the social roles forced upon me. I sometimes feel like my internal map of my body doesn't quite match up with the one that got created by puberty. It's not just gender presentation that is an issue, though that's a part of it for many of us. Everything just feels wrong. For me, being referred to as a he feels incorrect. Having hair on my face and a flat chest also feels incorrect. Wearing men's clothes just feels wrong. I have a hard time even relating to the world as a man, if that makes sense. The costume doesn't fit. It's not even the annoyance of being forced to put on a different role than the one I'd like. There is a visceral wrongness to it that I don't know if I'm properly equipped to explain. I distinguish between gender and sex a while up. The easiest way to think about trans is that it is a mismatch between gender and sex. The other thing to understand is that gender has many specific facets to it. There are gender roles, gender expression, gender identity, and so on. Specifically, trans is a mismatch between gender identity and sex. For whatever reason, the gender I feel I am just doesn't match the pre-transition sex of my body. For at least some trans people, one way to cure this is to mismatch that. One way to cure this mismatch has been transition. There doesn't seem to be any other way to rid us of this mismatch, and the Lord knows mainstream psychology has tried. Altering gender expression might alleviate it for a while, or for some people, even completely. But for others of us, it's simply not enough. I hope that helps. Feel free to tell me if none of this makes sense. It's been stewing around in my head for the past few days. So I think that is a really helpful way of distilling it, just the wrongness, like something. It's not just I can present my gender identity differently while still being called these other pronouns and this other word, this other gender that I don't feel like I am. As this listener says, it's that everything about it doesn't feel right, and that's not something that you should have to just live with, for the sake of some kind of bigger, like, revolutionary project of subverting the gender binary, right?
Yeah, well, and I think again to give a shout out to a blog post that we talked about a week ago, 2 weeks ago,
the Not Your Mom's Trans 101 blog post.
Because I think that for just again for anyone who wants to do further reading and to that blog post does a very good job of sort of expounding on what our listener brought up of the that the idea that sex is absolutely tied to biology in this like very clear-cut way. Mm-hmm. That post does a very good job of complicating that and also sort of complicating the gender is between the ears, sex is between the legs, which I think is probably helpful as a starting point. But I thought personally that blog post helped kind of it was sort of more. It just helped complicate that idea.
It expanded on it as opposed to, like to say that this is that's kind of a starting point.
Yeah.
But there's also, and like this listener, and also I have read now that the listener says we can use their name. So their name is Melissa, and their Twitter handle is Melissa Doom. If you feel like tweeting any comments or questions.
And Melissa has been on the show before,
and we really, really love hearing from Melissa. As she says, she doesn't really talk about genderqueer and intersex, and so it's I think that that it's important when we do talk about trans to say that it's not just that it's a variety of experiences, that some people feel I am the opposite gender that I have been assigned, but also some people feel these two things are not. I don't agree with these choices.
Yeah, it's a 3D kind of cube of experiences.
Yeah, which is what I certainly felt when I was younger, and still sometimes feel kind of like I don't agree to these. I didn't concede to these to only being given these two choices. And in terms of our first listener's email, which was again a very good faith question, and I think a good question to ask about the kind of larger. Revolutionary project of rejecting the gender binary. I think that making this point that trans that being trans is a bigger complication of the gender binary. But that said, some people, it's not, I say gender is a construct, but that doesn't mean that gender isn't. That the way people feel and experience gender isn't real.
Yeah.
It's just that the two choices are a construct, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that you might not strongly identify with one of those choices, but some people don't. So saying gender is a construct is just a way of saying, well, here are two things that we built. What if we build a lot of other things? So you're not just forced into one or the other.